Hello, Rabbi. I want to hear you.
That's very brave of you. I've been talking for about 3 minutes. My apologies to everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. So, when a holiday falls on a Friday, we're doing now chapter 6, halacha 1. When a holiday falls on Friday, on the holiday that precedes the Shabbos, you may not bake or cook the food that will be eaten on Shabbos. The prohibition is rabbinic in origin, and this is the whole idea. You're not allowed to do anything on Yom Tif for another day, even if that other day is Shabbos. So that one won't prepare food on a holiday for a subsequent weekday. For a person, we'll make a deduction. Since he's not allowed to cook for the Shabbos on a holiday, surely he may not cook for a weekday. Therefore, a person who prepares a portion of food on the day prior to the Yom Tif and relies on it is permitted to cook and bake for the Shabbos on the Yom Tif. In other words, if you start cooking for Shabbos on the day before Yom Tif, then you can continue through Yom Tif as well. The portion of food on which he relies is referred to as an Eruv Tavshilin. Why is this called an Eruv? Because it creates a distinction. The Eruv that is established in courtyards and lanes on the days before the Shabbos is intended to create a distinction so that people won't think it's permitted to transfer articles from one domain to another on Shabbos. So that is an Eruv, a distinction in space. Here, this portion of food creates a distinction and a reminder so that people don't think it's permitted to bake food on a holiday that won't be eaten on that day. And therefore, this food is referred to as an Eruv Tavshilin. It's an Eruv of time. It creates a bridge from Erev Yom Tif into Shabbos, allowing you to cook on Yom Tif for Shabbos. The minimum measure of Eruv Tavshilin is a portion of food the size of an olive. This suffices both for a single person and for 1,000. The Eruv must be established with bread, cereal, or the like. Must not be established with bread, cereal, or the like. It has to be a portion of food, cooked food that is served together with the bread. It has to be a tavshil. In other words, meat or fish or eggs. Nevertheless, you don't need to set aside a portion of choice food. It doesn't have to be the best food in the house. Even lentils at the bottom of the pot are sufficient, but cooked food. Moreover, one may even rely on the fat that is left on the side of the knife used to cut roast meat. If an amount the size of an olive is left, when one scrapes it off, one may use it for Eruv Tavshilin. So any form of cooked food. With regard to such an Eruv, the term cooked food also includes food that was roasted, stewed, pickled, or smoked. Even small fish that are prepared to be eaten by pouring hot water over them. If you remember, we had that in the halachas of Shabbos. It's a common idea. It can be relied upon for an Eruv Tavshilin. This Eruv must be accessible until one has baked all that one must bake, cooked all that one must cook, heated all the water required for Shabbos. If the Eruv is eaten, lost, or burned before then, you may no longer bake, cook, or heat water, except for the Yom Tif. Meaning, this food needs to be sitting there in the fridge, this big, delicious piece of fish or egg or meat, wait, and through the whole Yom Tif, it is your permission to cook on Yom Tif for Shabbos. If one has already begun eating a dough or preparing a portion of food and the Eruv is eaten or lost, one may complete the proportion of this loaf. This is all in cases of when the Eruv Tavshilin is lost. When a person sets aside an Eruv Tavshilin so that he and others may rely on it, he must grant others a portion as one grants them a portion with regard to the Eruv employed on Shabbos. In other words, as you'll see in the Siddur, I think it's on page 383 in the Siddur, you give it to the other person and they accept the Eruv Tavshilin on your behalf. Whoever is allowed to, whoever is allowed to acquire a portion on behalf of others with regard to the Eruvin on the Shabbos may acquire a portion on behalf with regard to Eruv Tavshilin. Whoever is not allowed to acquire a portion with regard to those Eruvin cannot acquire a portion for this Eruv either. So you remember what we learned there. Zayin, it is not necessary to notify the others whom one grants a portion of the Eruv before the commencement of the holiday. In other words, that's why the rabbi of the city usually does it for the whole city, but you shouldn't rely on that. You should do it in your house yourself. And once you do it in the house, you can do it for the whole household. However, they must know that someone has granted them a portion and established an Erev before they rely on it for cooking and baking. In other words, it only works for people that know about it. Even if they didn't receive notification until the holiday itself, they're permitted to rely on it. So on Shul, I announce that if you didn't do it, unfortunately, you can do it. You can still cook. A person may establish an Erev on behalf of all the inhabitants of a city and all those within its holiday limits. And on the following day, you can announce whoever didn't establish an Erev Tavshilin may rely on my Erev. Ches, hamaniach eruvei tavshilin. When you put it down, chayiv levarich, to make a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. Blessed are you, God, who has sanctified us with His mitzvahs and commanded us regarding the mitzvah of eruv. At this time, he should say, when he does, he says, with this eruv, will be permitted to bake and to cook tomorrow on the holiday for the Shabbos. If he includes others in the eruv, he should say, for me and for so and so and so and so, or for all the inhabitants of the city to bake and cook on the holiday for the Shabbos. When a person did not establish an Erev himself, and others did not include him in their Erev, and just he's forbidden to cook and bake, his flour and his food are forbidden to be used on the holiday. So if you don't make an Erev Tavshilin, you cannot touch it. It is thus forbidden for another person who himself established an Erev to cook or bake, for the person who did not establish an Erev using provisions belonging to the person who didn't establish an Erev, unless he transfers ownership of his food to the person who established an Erev. Okay, so if Mr. Katz made an Erev in his house, and next door Mr. Cohen didn't make an Erev, so Mr. Cohen tells Mr. Katz, you know what, can you come to my house and bake and cook for me? Mr. Katz says, no, I'm not allowed to. It's your food. Your food doesn't have an Erev, unless you give me all the food. If this transfer is made, such an arrangement is permitted because the person who established an Erev was cooking and baking with his own provisions, but the ownership was transferred to him. And if afterwards the person who established the Erev desires, he may give the food as a present to the person who didn't establish an Erev. So Mr. Katz can give it back to Mr. Cohen once the delicious meatballs have been made. Yud, when a person did not establish an Erev and cooked and baked to eat food on the holiday, and there was food left over, or he invited guests and didn't come, he may eat the remainder on the following day. Okay? So let's say Yom Tif is on Thursday and Friday, and I didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, and I cooked food, and I have leftovers. I can eat the leftovers on Shabbos. However, if he acted with guile with regard to this matter, he is forbidden to partake in his food. In other words, he invited guests he knew that wouldn't come, or he did things in a way that you shouldn't do it. Then if he's tricking, then it's not allowed. If the person transgressed and baked on the holiday for the Shabbos without establishing Erev Tavshilin, it is not forbidden for him to partake of it. Why did I? Okay, so if a person did it without an Erev, he just went ahead and broke the law. The sages said you're still allowed to eat the food. Why did our sages judge a person with guile more severely than a person who willfully transgresses, imposing prohibitions on the form not allowed to see here? So the guy who does it intentionally is not punished as the guy who does it crookedly. Because if leniency were granted to a person who acts with guile, everyone who acts with guile, and the entire concept of Erev shouldn't be forgotten. So rather, make provisions for those who do it intentionally, but to violate Torah law by contrast is a rare phenomenon. A person won't do that. And the fact that a person transgresses once doesn't mean that he will transgress in the future. But if he's fooling himself, then he might do it more. Yud Aleph, when the 2 days of a holiday are celebrated in the diaspora, falls on Thursday and Friday, and the Tavshilin should be established on the Wednesday, right? The day before the holiday. If a person forgot and didn't establish an Erev for the holiday, he should deposit the Erev on the first day and make a stipulation. In other words, what is implied? He should deposit his Erev Tavshilin on Thursday and say, like this: if today is a holiday and tomorrow is a weekday, I will cook and bake for the Shabbos tomorrow, for there's no requirement. I'm allowed to. If today is a weekday and tomorrow is a holiday, with this day I'll be permitted to bake and cook tomorrow on the holiday for the Shabbos. So because the 2 days of Yom Tov are quote unquote in doubt, he can make an Erev Tavshilin on the Thursday on condition that if tomorrow is a weekday, then I'm cooking tomorrow on a weekday. And if today is the weekday, I'm making the Erev Tavshilin today. I should just point out that commonly we don't follow this leniency. cite a similar example. When a person possesses 2 baskets of produce from which truma was not separated, on the first day of the holiday, you should say, if today is a weekday, may this basket be considered truma for the other basket. And if today is a holiday, the words be of no consequence. You should then designate the basket as truma and leave it. In other words, we're applying this form of using the doubt in the first or second day of Yom Tif, of a 2-day Yom Tif, to allow for this. On the second day of the holiday, you should turn and say, if today is a holiday, then my words be of no consequence. If today is a weekday, may this basket be considered truma with other basket. You should then designate the same basket as truma, leave it as he did on the first day. And after depositing the basket, designate truma, and partake of the other one. In other words, he has one basket. He has these 2 baskets here, and truma needs to be taken off. He can use one against the other on the 2 days of the holiday, using the leniency of the doubt involved. When does the above apply? Not any 2-day Yom Tif, but dafke Yom Tif sheni shel Golius, right? Like 2 days of Pesach, 2 days of Sukkot, and of course 2 days of Shavuot, which are the most in doubt. Concerning the 2 days observed as a holiday of Rosh Hashanah, however, that's different. The person who forgot and didn't establish an Eid on Wednesday, so if Rosh Hashanah is Thursday and Friday, he didn't make an Eid, he does not have another opportunity to establish an Eid. He should either rely on the Eid established by others on his behalf, meaning ask the rabbi or someone if they did it and rely on them, or transfer ownership of his flour to someone who established an Eid, that someone else cook with it, to be cooked, or he's forbidden to bake and cook on Shabbos. Why? Because Rosh Hashanah is a much stronger connection of the 2 days. Similarly, a person who did not separate truma on the Wednesday may not separate it until Saturday night. Lachi Dalit. Any questions? Oh, good. Okay, this is what I said before, why we do not follow this today. The above concepts applied only when the high courts of Israel would sanctify the new moon based on the observation of witnesses. And the Jews in the diaspora would celebrate 2 days as a holiday to avoid the doubt, for they didn't know the date on which the inhabitants of Eretz Yisrael sanctified the new moon. So because in those days, the second day of Yom Tov was truly in doubt, that's why you're able to rely on the leniency. At present, however, the inhabitants of Eretz Yisrael follow a fixed calendar and sanctify the months accordingly. Therefore, the second day of a holiday is observed not to avoid doubt, but to perpetuate a custom. And therefore, the Rambam says, a person may not establish on a conditional basis either an Erev Tavshilin or Erev Chatzeres or a Shutuf and a lane on the second day of Yom Tiv for the first day of Yom Tiv, nor may tithe untithed produce on a conditional basis. Instead, he must perform all such activities on the days prior to the holiday, on Wednesday. So today, there is no escape hatch for people to do this on the second day of Yom Tiv, because the second day of Yom Tiv is considered like the first. But now that Rambam talks for something which he hasn't spoken about for the previous 6 chapters, which is the elements of observance of the Yom Tiv. If you remember, the very first halach in the laws of Yom Tiv was the prohibition. And everything was about the prohibitions, because Yom Tiv itself doesn't have things which make it holy, other than what we'll mention now, but mostly, as we'll read in the upcoming chapters, it's specific things to each holiday. So we'll learn about the laws of Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, etc., etc. But now we're going to talk a little bit about some of that which does apply. Tezayin. Just like it's a mitzvah to honor the Shabbos and to take delight in it, so too do these obligations apply to all the Yom Tovim, as implied by Isaiah, the Kadosh Hashem Mechubad, sanctified unto God and honored. This applies to all the holidays, for they are called holy convocations. We have explained the obligation implied by honor and delight in Hilchos Shabbos. In other words, all these things that we spoke about there, of beautiful clothes, of delicious food, of wine, of the best cuts of meat. Similarly, it's proper for a person not to partake on a significant meal the day before the Yom Tif, from afternoon onward, as on a Friday. For this also is an expression of honor that you come to Yom Tif hungry. And everyone who treats the holidays with disrespect is considered as if he became associated with idol worship. Pretty serious stuff. Yudzayin. Shivas Yemei Pesach, it's forbidden to recite fast to recite eulogies on the 7 days of Pesach, the 8 days of Sukkot, and other Yom Tovim. On these days, a person is obligated to be happy and in good spirits. One second. So the rejoicing that we're referring to here means the verse referring to sacrificing the peace offerings, as will be explained in Hilchas Chagiga. Nevertheless, included in V'samachta b'chagecha, to rejoice in the holiday, is the charge to rejoice with your children and the members of your household, each one in a manner appropriate for him. How do we rejoice on the holiday? Even more than Shabbos, much more, what is implied, Ketzad. Children should be given roasted seeds, nuts, and sweets. For a woman, one should buy attractive clothes and jewelry according to one's financial capacity. Men should eat meat and drink wine, for there's no happiness without partaking of meat, nor is there happiness without partaking of wine. So it seems like not much has changed in the last 800 plus years that the Rambam, since the Rambam wrote this. It seems like the same things still make us happy. When a person eats and drinks the celebration of a holiday, he is obligated to feed the converts, the orphans, the widows, and others who are destitute and poor. In contrast, a person who locks the gates of his courtyard and eats and drinks with his children and wife without feeding the poor and embittered is not in sense. Their sacrifice will be like the bread of mourners, and all that partake of shall become impure, for they kept their bread for themselves alone. This happiness is a disgrace for them. As implied by Malachi, for I will spread dung on your face, the dung of your festival celebrations. In other words, all that we eat for the consumption of our body, if that's how we take it in, then what we're celebrating is what's coming out. You test. Although eating and drinking on the holidays are included in the positive mitzvah to rejoice, one should not devote the entire day to food and drink. The following is a desired practice. In the morning, the entire people should get up. They should attend the shul, the houses of study, where they pray, read a portion of the Torah pertaining to the holiday. Afterwards, they should return home and eat. Then they should go to the house of study, where they read from the written law and review it, and review the oral law until noon. Afternoon, they should recite the afternoon service and return home to eat and drink for the remainder of the day until nightfall. Chaf. When a person eats, drinks, celebrates in the festival, he should not let himself become overly drawn to drinking wine, mirth, and levity, saying whoever indulges in these activities more is increasing his observance of the mitzvah of rejoicing. Getting more drunk doesn't mean getting more happy. For drunkenness, profuse mirth, and levity are not rejoicing, they are frivolity and foolishness. And we are not commanded to indulge in frivolity and foolishness, but rather in rejoicing that involves the service of the Creator of all existence. Thus, Deuteronomy says, because you did not serve God, your Lord, with happiness and a glad heart, with an abundance and prosperity, this teaches us that the service of God involves joy. And it is impossible to serve God while in the midst of levity, frivolity, or drunkenness. Pretty powerful words there. The Jewish court is obligated to appoint officers who will circulate among the people on the festivals, check the gardens, the orchards, the riverbanks, to see that men and women do not gather to eat or drink, lest they conduct themselves in modesty and come to sin. Similarly, they must warn people that men and women should not mix at festive gatherings and homes, nor should they overindulge in wine, lest they be led to sin. The days between the first and the seventh day of Pesach, and the days between the first and eighth day, are called Chol HaMoed. They're also called Moed. These are 4 days during Pesach and the 5 days during Sukkot. Although we're obligated to celebrate on these days and it's forbidden to deliver a eulogy or fast, it is permitted to deliver a eulogy before the corpse of a Torah sage. After he is buried, however, it's forbidden to deliver a eulogy on these days. Needless to say that on a Shchedesh Chanukah and Purim, we can deliver a eulogy with the corpse of a Torah sage, although it's forbidden to fast or deliver a eulogy in other circumstances on these days. And again, after the burial, however, it's forbidden to deliver a eulogy on these days. Chav Gimel 23. The bier of a corpse should not be left in the street during Chol HaMoed, so that no one will be prompted to deliver eulogy. Instead, it should be taken from the home to the grave. We do not observe the rites of mourning during Chol HaMoed, nor does one rent his garments, partake of the meal of solace served after the burial, or bear his shoulder because of a deceased during Chol HaMoed, with the exception of the relatives who are obligated to mourn because of him. You don't make mourning ceremonies, etc. If the deceased was a sage or an upright man, or one who was present at his death, one should rend one's clothes because of his death during the Chol HaMoed, even though one is not related to the deceased, and the shiva will only happen later. And we may not rend our garments on the second day of a holiday at all. And this applies even to the relatives of the deceased. Lastly, halacha chav dalid. Nashim b'fnei hamayid. During Chol Hamoed, women lament, but they may not pound their heads. This is referring to the ancient custom where they were actually hire women who had a very powerful gift of arousing people's emotions. And, you go to a cemetery today, sometimes it looks like a social scene, until the family come out. You got people around to talk. So in those times, we would have people that would create the right atmosphere to realize what you're coming for. So he says, you're not allowed to bring these people that would pound their hands on each other or in grief or mourn. Once the corpse is buried, they may not lament. On the Shchedesh Chana can put it, they can lament and pound their hands on each other in grief before the corpse is born, but they may not mourn. What is meant by lamenting? That's when they all lament in unison. What is meant by mourning? That's when one recites a dirge and the others respond in unison. And lastly, it's forbidden to have a eulogy recited for a deceased person 30 days before the festival, so the festival will not arrive when he is sad and his heart is grieved and hurting because of the memory of his agony. Instead, he should remove the grief from his heart and direct his attention toward joy. Any questions? Hello, Jeff. Hello, Kent. Hello, John. Hello, Dennis, Shmuley, Ryan, Leanne, David, Martin, Mark. I'm apologizing. Any questions?